I could join all you guys and also share my journey to CTA. And one thing I'd like to add is, I passed my CTA in July, and I've been waiting for a chance to actually share this. So it's really good that you guys are the first group I'm sharing my experience with. So I'm definitely open to feedback also at the end of this session. And in fact, I'm happy to spend more time if there are any questions. And you guys can always reach out to me on social media like Twitter or LinkedIn if you have any questions. So anyway, with that, let's quickly get started then. So today the agenda is over the next 25 or 30 odd slides. I'll just talk about, briefly about me, and then have a quick review of what the CTA exam is all about. And why did I choose to become one? Because I feel the reasons of doing this exam has to be pretty strong, because as you know, there's a lot of hard work involved in this exam, and therefore the motivation is pretty important to understand where that is coming from. And then I'll shed some light on how I studied, what are some of the things I saw in terms of study material, and what are the things that are available to all candidates, regardless of where they're coming from. And also some of the lessons learned from my experience, like some tips, tricks, and other things that I learned from what I did here. And I'll try to also then do a little bit of a deep dive into the CTA exam and just explain what are the different stages in the exam, and what are some of the things we can do. And then some of the myths. I just have a slide on some of the CTA myths that I've heard, and I'll see what my opinion is on those things. And then again, just have some other resources which I thought were important and useful to me in my preparation. So that's the high-level agenda, and we'll see how we go over the next half an hour or 45 minutes. Okay, so yeah, before I move ahead, I just want to again reiterate that even though I'm a Salesforce employee, today the views that I'm presenting are all in my individual capacity, and these are my personal views and my personal opinions. And I always feel that whether it's the CTA or any other certification, lots of people have their own different opinions. And I like to listen to different opinions, and I like to take what makes sense to me. So that's what I encourage you guys, take what makes sense to you guys from this presentation. Okay. So
sorry, Calvin, to interrupt you.
Yeah, sorry.
If you, we cannot see any of your screen. If you're sharing any.
Okay. Let me know if you guys can see the agenda screen.
Yes, we can see it now. Thanks.
Okay, and please do let me know. Please feel free to stop and let me know if this happens again. Thanks. Great. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So quickly about me, I won't spend too much time here. As Hamza said, I have my CTA since July. And my previous role before I came to Salesforce. In fact, I've spent 3 years now at Salesforce. So it's my 4th year going on. And previously, I was the technical architect and manager at IBM here in Melbourne, Australia. And I also have a master's degree in computer science from the US, and close to 14 years experience working in 3 different countries. And I'm currently now in Australia. And I have a very strong development background. So did a lot of C++ and Java back in the day. And so in my career, I've gradually progressed from being a developer, senior dev, tech lead, and tech arc. And I live in Melbourne with my wife and with my 2 lovely cats, Ada and Freddy, which will probably you will see a lot more of them in these slides. But Ada is the brown one, the Burmese cat, and Freddy is the little naughty ginger cat. And some of the key verticals that I worked in are telco, public sector, healthcare, and higher education. I'm mentioning these things because, as you know, the CTA scenario, you could get the scenario could be based on one domain. For example, you could get a scenario that is based on the energy and utilities vertical, right? So it helps to have some experience in different verticals, but even if you don't have, there are obviously tips to overcome that, and as we'll see in the rest of the presentation. So when I look at someone who has done the CTA, my first question is, what is this person's background? That's what I used to do. So I thought I'll just mention what I've done. I won't go into too much of this depth here, but basically, as I said, I have a strong developer or a programming background. So 2005, so it seems almost a long time ago, and it is actually 16 years ago. Did my bachelor's, graduate in India. And then after 2 years, I had a dream of doing higher studies abroad. So I applied to the US and got a scholarship and admission at the University of Texas, Arlington. So I did my master's in computer science there. So after graduating, got a job just doing, vanilla stuff like C Sharp and stuff. Something wasn't right with that. And then when I got an opportunity to come back to Texas, I worked at a company called OneSource Virtual in a way that basically changed my life, so as to speak, because the company introduced me to cloud computing, and I was working on a cloud-based ERP called Workday. Not sure if you guys have heard about it. And they had something called Salesforce internally. So basically, I was doing Workday consulting to external customers, and I was asked to learn something called Salesforce and do something called Apex and Visual Force for these guys internally. So I began my Salesforce career as an end user. So I was doing Apex Visual Force for the company itself, and I spent doing that for maybe 3 years. And then 2013 is when I attended Dreamforce, which you guys know is the Salesforce annual conference, and it was pretty awesome seeing that conference in person. And that is when I first heard about something called CTA. I got my first certification then, and I was just thinking, what is the CTA? And someone was talking about it, and I was like, wow, there's something called CTA. Someday I hope I can reach that level of studying and getting it. So then over the next few years, I was just working in consulting, Salesforce consulting in companies like PwC and stuff. Then finally, 2016, I came to Australia from the US. And as I said previously, I was working at IBM, and before that at RXP. And so my last role was as a tech architect and a tech manager. So it took me almost 3 years to go from the first cert to the 16 certs at this point. So by the end of 2017, I had the system and application architect certifications. So back then, I mistakenly thought that just because I have these certs, I can, do the CTA. But I was really mistaken. I realized that there's actually a big gap between the certs and the CTA. So anyway, 2018 April, joined Salesforce, kind of a dream come true, and I would just focus on my work. I didn't think of the CTA at all. So after 2 years, I picked up that thread again. I was like, okay, now let's pick up the CTA. So May, I qualified for our internal CTA training, which like any other CTA training is all about they assign a coach to you, and there's some internal stuff that you go through. And November 2020 is when I attempted my CTA the first time, and this was in the middle of the pandemic, and it was a pretty interesting time to take the CTA, but I got a partial pass, so I had to retake a couple of sections. And then I forgot about the CTA again. And then in May of this year, I again picked it up. I'm like, okay, let me get this done. So again, 2 months I studied. And then July, I attempted and I got my CTA. And since then, it's been a different experience. And that's why I wanted to share this with you guys. Okay, so I hope everything is good. I hope the screens are moving. Let's talk about what the CTA is. So quickly, the CTA as Salesforce defines it is basically a person who is using their Salesforce knowledge, skills, and the capabilities. And what they do basically is they assess their customers' existing architecture, and they are able to provide a very scalable, high-performing solution to the customer, which is built on Salesforce technologies. And the other thing is this person has to be very good at communicating, because you have different stakeholders, like you have technical stakeholders or business stakeholders. So being able to communicate to either group in an effective manner. And finally, when you do your design, right, how does this design translate into the build? How does the build translate into something that goes into production? How does that production go live? How do you manage things after the go live? So that's all about the delivery framework. So you need to have knowledge about that as well. So all of you guys have seen this pyramid, right? So some of you are maybe in different zones here. Some of you may have application architect, some of you may have system architect. So this is that famous pyramid that all of us architects know in Salesforce, right? So obviously the top of the pyramid is the certified technical architect, and that is usually a goal and a dream for most of us. So just to talk about that exam, right? First of all, as you guys know, every exam in Salesforce has a study guide. So I encourage that if you guys are interested about the exam, the very first thing you do is to look at the exam guide and understand what are the different aspects of this exam. So some of the key things are, the very first thing is the prerequisite is that, as you know, you need to have the system and application architect credentials. And the second prerequisite, which was a recent change, I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but there's a new exam that has come in. It's called the evaluation exam. You need to pass that exam. It's like a mini CTA. I'll talk more about it later, but you need to pass that to be allowed to take the CTA exam. And as you know, it is a closed book exam. That means you cannot refer any materials during the exam. So what exactly is the CTA, right? So basically, in the CTA, you're given a scenario. The scenario could range from 10 to 12 pages long, right? It's a very pretty solid scenario, and it could be in any domain. It could be maybe a energy company or a banking company or something. I'm just making this up, right? You need to solve a real life use case in the time span of 3 hours. So if you think about it, 3 hours is quite a less time, right? Because in real life, in our projects, day-to-day life, we can usually get time from, let's say, a couple of weeks or a month to do design for a big project. But imagine being given a scenario and imagine doing that in 3 hours, coming up with all this stuff, right? And plus, it has to be kind of precise. It has to be kind of correct with justifications and so on and so forth. So after that is done, 45 minutes you need to spend to present the scenario to the judges. And these judges are elite CTA judges, three of them. You will be presenting to them, they'll be listening to you. And then the last bit of the exam is 40 minutes where they will be doing Q&A. They will ask you questions about your solution and you have to defend your solution. So when I look at this, for me, the best analogy is like this is like the pressure cooker test in the Master Chef contest, right? Like you're given a time limit and you need to come up with something which is awesome. And basically, time is your enemy in this whole CTA. So how do you prepare for that? That's the whole point of the CTA preparation. So with that being said, some of the artifacts that you need. So basically, the key artifacts in the CTA that you need to produce within the 3 hours, you need to kind of give an introduction. We need to kind of identify what are the key systems in their architecture landscape. Uh, you need to identify who are all the actors, what are the licenses that you need to provide to them. That's actually a very tough thing if you think about it. And then all the different strategies. For example, is this single org strategy? Is this multi org strategy? What kind of file strategy are you using? Are you going to use box.com, for example? Are you going to use mobile publisher or the Salesforce app? What will it be single currency? Will there be translations? Then you need to come up with the data model. The data model is the most important artifact in the CTA, in my opinion, and I'll talk more about that. But other things are role hierarchy. You need to identify the large data volumes. And then you need to solve the end-to-end business process. This usually takes the most time in the CTA because imagine you've got almost 8-9 pages of business requirements. You need to solve each and every one of them. And when you're solving them, they in turn will affect your data model. They in turn will affect your license and so on and so forth. Then you need to solve the SSO requirements, the data migration requirements. And finally, you need to also solve the governance and the release management requirements. Like how do you govern this project? How do you establish best practices? How do you take this project into production? And the most important thing is the why. It is not enough to give the right solution in the CTA. That's why it's so hard, in my opinion. The answer is not important. Why did you come to that answer is more important than that. In other words, you need to be able to justify your answer to the judges. So that is the key of the CTA. Okay, so let's have another look at the pyramid. And I'll just take a quick break, guys. Any questions or am I audible enough or is it fine? Like, is it displaying correctly?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
And I
perfect.
think, yeah, everything looks fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Okay, so again, looking at this pyramid, as you know, these individual certifications, some of you may be planning it or some of you already have some of them. They're all specializations in each domain. For example, sharing is sharing specialization. This is all about data architecture and stuff. Similarly, this is about identity. So once you do them, then you get the application and the system architect credentials, right? And then you're ready to take this. But the problem is there is a gap between this and this. And the gap is what I mentioned previously. Because so far, these are exams which you are taking, like, they may be multiple choice or some. These are exams basically, you're writing them. But now you're basically walking the talk. Now you are taking this to the next level wherein you are actually solving a real life business use case and you're presenting it to a judge or a bunch of judges, and you're also defending it. So that's where the difficulty level is amplified. It's like you are doing only exams, but now it's like real life. I'm talking to real people, and I need to solve a real business use case and justify it also using Salesforce technology. So that is where the challenge comes, and that is why this exam is kind of hard, right? So therefore, we need to prepare and we need to fix that gap. So let's see how we do that. Okay, so in terms of my motivations, as I said, it was a dream when I saw what the CTA was at Dreamforce 2013. But back then, the CTO was more of an acronym for me. I didn't fully appreciate or understand what it actually meant. And as I kept going older, wiser, and doing more Salesforce, I realized that it is not about the destination. It's more about the journey. And that's why you'll see that I stress a lot on this word called journey. That's why they call it journey to CTA. And I felt that based on my experience, the journey will improve the breadth and the depth of our Salesforce knowledge. So regardless of whether we end up getting the CTA or not, I felt that my breadth and depth of the knowledge, like I'm learning new things. I thought I knew OAuth, but now when I did the CTA, I'm like, I learned so many new domains in the OAuth stream, for example. And then, of course, you join a very elite group. So currently there are only 400 CTAs in the world. I think approximately 400. So now, obviously now there are more people becoming CTAs because now there's more information available. And that's a very good thing. But there's still a very small number comparatively. And I feel that in my own experience, when you have your CTA, you instantly get credibility with customers, with your own peers, with your colleagues and stuff, right? So they know that, okay, this guy has the CTA. That means he or she has the knowledge and the experience, and they, whatever solution they come, they must have thought of trade-offs and justifications and so on and so forth. Also, I felt that the journey, it makes us a well-rounded enterprise architect. For example, because I came from so much of a technical background, right? Sometimes I'm like, I sometimes struggle when I need to explain technical things to a business user. Sorry, is there a question?
No, I don't think so. There is a question.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And so I feel that, this kind of increased my confidence also in my day-to-day work now after my CT. I feel that I'm more confident. Like I was more of an introvert. Now I feel I have confidence to, maybe put my opinion because I know it's backed up by some proof. It's backed up by some trade-offs and justifications, which I'm applying the CTA method for that decision. And I also felt that more doors are opening with the CTA. Like you network with people who probably you didn't reach out to previously. Now you're reaching out to them and stuff, and talking to people. You get more people, and that the same applies when you're studying for it. When you're studying for the CTA, you end up meeting so many different people who are also in the same boat like you. So it's really a good thing. Like it brings the whole world closer, in my opinion. And I felt that the achievement obviously is a huge accomplishment for me personally. And one more thing is, when I was not a CTA, sometimes I used to hear some misguided opinions by people saying, you have to be a CTA to be a great architect. And my answer is that is not correct. Obviously, there are many architects today also in the domain in our Salesforce ecosystem. They may not have CTA because, for example, they didn't have the time to study, or they had other priorities in life, right? So obviously, CTA doesn't mean automatically that someone is really good or something. But if you go through this process of the CTA, the journey, it will undoubtedly make you a better architect than what you were today. That is for sure. So it's a balance between whether I do it or not, and I'll talk about that as well. Anyway, so those are motivations. And so I'm just saying, LinkedIn, when I put my post, and my post was more about being a gratitude thing, because I knew, okay, I'm done this accomplishment, but mainly I'm here today because I feel that, okay, I did effort of my own, but without the people who helped me, so many people, whether it was people at Salesforce, whether it was people whose blogs I read, some people on YouTube, some people on LinkedIn, people on Twitter. Without those people, I'm honestly telling all of you, I could not have done the CTA. So the biggest thanks from my side goes to all of the people who helped me across different places. And I'm just putting it here because this post got 50,000 views. I don't think in my whole life again I'll ever reach this kind of viewership again. But I feel this is what the CTA holds importance to everyone. So it is a good thing to get. It's a good goal to set if you have the time to do it. That's my personal opinion. Okay, so how do we prepare for the CTA, right? So this is a very general indicative timeline. So basically, let's say you've finished all your base certifications. That means you've finished your admin, platform dev 1, sales cloud consultant, service cloud consultant, all those basic certs. After that, it takes like 1 to 3 years, depending on how free you are, personal life, time allocation and stuff. It takes 1 to 3 years to finish that second level of the pyramid, basically doing the designer and the domain certs. At this point, you will be the application and system architect. So that itself is a great milestone, actually. Even getting one of them is a huge thing, in my opinion. So after that, within a few weeks or a month, you are ready to actually start your official CTA journey. So here is where the actual game begins. So I feel that once you finish these certs, you are probably 6 to 2 years away from a CTA exam, because again, it depends on your personal situation, how much time you can spend, how much knowledge you have at that point, right? How many gaps in your knowledge are there? So some of the key steps you do is basically you do the architect trail mix. This is a very massive trail mix. It covers 9 different domains, and basically you go and see, what do you know, what don't you know. You just quickly go and cover any gaps that you have. Because see, these domain certs, as you know, right, the pass percentage is like 68 or 70, something like that, right? So sometimes what happens, we may have some blind spots. We may not read some topics which may be important for the CTA, but we may not have read them at that point. So we need to go back and read that, because in the CTA, anything is fair game in Salesforce. Anything can be asked at any point. And then you also have the Salesforce Trailblazer community. I assume and hope that most of you are already members of this community, but if you're not, please do join. There's a lot of focus on the CTA in this community. The most important thing I liked personally is that many people who are looking for study buddies or a study group, they post there and they kind of get stuff. And all the main Trailhead CTA program directors and other people who run the CTA program, they are actively posting there. So it's a way to directly contact those people and get first-hand information from them. And then Salesforce has a course called CTA 601. This is optional because it's a paid course. I did that through Salesforce, and I felt it was important because that was my first taste of the CTA exam. And then obviously there's a lot of study involved, a lot of practice. You've heard this from many people, right? I won't delve too much into it, but there's a lot of hard work involved. And now, obviously, Salesforce has introduced this new evaluation exam. I believe the exam I think it's a good step because it kind of gives you a preview of the board exam. So you need to pass the evaluation exam. And only then, once you're done this and you pass this, then you're allowed to take the board exam. Then you can schedule the board exam and you can do the final study that's required to prepare for that board exam. Okay. So my belief of the CTA is that this is a marathon. I will repeat this point many times in this presentation, but what I mean to say is it's like a marathon, right? So in marathons, people don't run very fast. They run at a very constant pace, and they know when to raise their pace. Like the final stretch to the finish line, that's when they put their maximum effort. So they increase the chances of winning. So that's how we need to do. We need to be constant and slow and steady, and that's a better way of getting the CTA. Okay, so before people start the CTA, I keep telling them sometimes there is peer pressure. It's like, okay, he or she has done it, maybe I should do it, right? So I keep telling different candidates who start with the CTA, the biggest thing to remember is that it's a huge commitment in terms of time and effort. And you need to get the support of people who are around you, mainly your family, for example, right? People are at home. You're basically taking time away from them. You may not be able to help out too much, or go out with them. Just simple things, and these things will start adding up, right? Because now you need to spend time to study. Also, your employer, right? Ideally, your employer should be encouraging your efforts and supporting, like whatever they can do, they should be supporting, because the CTA, if you get, is not just for you, it's also for your employer, also for your customer. It helps you in so many different ways. So as I said, be ready to put long hours of study. And it means a lot of sacrifices, personal sacrifices. For example, you can't spend too much time with loved ones, and definitely holidays, like weekends and public holidays are almost gone, because sometimes they may coincide with exams and mocks and things like that. So that is something I had to get used to. And doing all of this will definitely take a toll on you, like physical health or mental health, and I'll talk more about that. And the last thing is, we need to keep an open mind. We need to have an appetite, a hunger for learning more stuff. And there's no room for ego and stuff, right? We need to keep that aside and say, okay, I don't know stuff, I need to learn stuff. With that mindset, I feel that we are more open to learning new things, listening to feedback, and identifying gaps in our own learning and knowledge. Okay, so these are the things we need to know before we start the CTA. So let me talk about how I studied at a high level. So mainly, as I said, Salesforce had internal training for us, and there was a coach assigned to me. So I won't mention too many names here, but my coach was Jerry, and he was also a CTA and a program architect at Salesforce. So I was really lucky that we had the luxury of having a coach. So basically, the coach will help you identify gaps in your understanding, coach you in few things here and there. And if you're lucky enough to get one as a mentor or a coach, that's well and good. But a lot of people don't have the luxury, right? So sometimes there's no mentor or coach. And end of the day, you are the person who has to do the hard work. You are the person who has to take the exam. So coaches will only go so far, and their contribution is a lot, but the hard work has to be put in by you. So what I did was basically I put a high level plan of study. And again, let me assure you guys, I'm not at all a very formal kind of a person. Like, I'm like, I just take things easy. I know people who do a very formal plan of study, like, this is like a timetable kind of a thing. I just put a very high level plan of study saying, okay, I am going to target in November. That means let me work backwards and see how do I study for this. And the way I did that was, as I said, the CTA study guide. I looked at it and I was like, okay, these are the gaps in my knowledge. And then I was like, okay, creating simple notes, things like that. For example, delegated external administrator, right? I kind of forgot how to set it up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to read that. I'll put in, then what's the difference between that and, some other kind of user, a super user, for example, right? So make notes on that. So light notes, like very basic notes. Okay. So that I can go back and review the notes instead of having to review the whole help article. And also I looked at some strengths. I assumed at the time that, I know OAuth because I presented OAuth at Dreamforce, all that stuff, but those were all basics. For the CTA, the basics are important, but you also need to do the next level, the second and third level of OAuth, for example. So that was a gap. So I had to identify those things and learn all that stuff. And then I gathered all the study materials that I need. So mainly the study materials were all links. So basically creating bookmarks, arranging the bookmarks, which I did a very bad job anyways, but some white papers, articles, blogs from people, just collect them and keep them for repeated review. Obviously studying, you need to find time between work. So sometimes I used to study early morning, sometimes late night. Sometimes I could not study because I was so burnt out from work. And weekends, I used to catch up, 3-4 hours of study on weekends and stuff. And I tried to make a routine, and this worked towards the end. I wish I'd done this very early, but I realized that if we do a routine and we stick to the routine, remember habits take almost 3 weeks or 1 month to form. So the sooner you start, the better. So, for example, waking up early and studying early in the morning, that's a routine. If you're not a morning person, then you need to spend some time to make that habit. Anyway, the next thing is what kind of study style works for you, right? So, for example, you can form a study group, and this is what I see a lot of people doing. And because today we have the internet and stuff, study groups are not limited to the cities or countries anymore. People just join up from different countries. Like, as I said, it brings people together. You can form a study group. The benefits of having a study group is other people will keep you accountable. For example, you're saying, okay, he or she is studying hard, and today I should stop watching Netflix. I should go and study so that, when we meet next time, I also can contribute to the learning session. And studying, you can also study solo. I did more of the second part because pandemic time, not many people are doing CTA, and I like to study solo anyways, but I did some group study. So I would say I was a bit of a hybrid guy, doing more of solo study but doing some group studies towards the end of the CTA preparation. So anyway, so choose what makes sense to you, but I see that people like to study with a group more. Okay, so then obviously, as I said, study and practice go hand in hand. So you need to practice. And as I said, you've got artifacts in the CTA. You need to keep practicing these artifacts. And what are these artifacts? Mainly the diagrams, like flow diagrams. The judge could ask you, okay, can you explain the user agent OAuth flow end to end? Can you explain the nested flow of SAML and OAuth end to end? So then you need to be, mind, you need to know the diagrams. How does the data flow? What happens? What is the relay state? Where does my domain come in here? Who does the redirection and stuff? So you need to know all those flows. And for that, you need to keep practicing them. Data model again. So data model, as I said, very important. You need to draw a very concise data model. It should be very neat. It should be labeled correctly. So how do you do all that, right? And also, how do you present to an audience? So maybe, as you notice, I kind of talk fast. That's my natural way of talking, right? But in the CTA, you must be conscious about, okay, I'm presenting to 3 judges. They are taking notes of my presentation. Therefore, I need to help them by pacing my presentation, so that I stress on important things. I help them to kind of help me by making my presentation clear. So all of that needs practice. And similarly, increasing the speed of presentation. As I said, 3 hours you get. In the 3 hours you need to solve. So you need to practice solving things. So one cool tip I used was the flashcards. I don't know if you guys have used this before. I'll talk about what it means. So I was using a software called Anki, and there are different softwares for flashcards and even online tools available, right? But Anki is a kind of a software. It's open source, it's free, and you can basically just create simple question answer and stuff. As I said, things like super user, delegated external user authentication, questions about OAuth, questions about identity, questions about integrations. I used to make question answer, and just put all these cards into Anki, and the software basically when I need to revise, I could just revise 100 questions or 150 questions in like half an hour. I used to do that all the time, so that things which are not very clear, I don't remember them, I use this software to remind myself. So I used to do all things like that. And again, as I said, you get these scenarios. The board exam, the CTA team has made them available publicly, some of the sample scenarios. So I used to take them, I used to solve them by simulating the same time pressure and see how I'm doing it. And after you do this, you can present this to your peers or mentor or whoever, and you can get feedback. So then with that feedback, you will identify gaps. And once you study to fix the gaps, you will basically repeat this whole process. And the last thing I'll mention is, while you're doing all this stuff, relaxing is very important. You need to take the time to recharge, and you need to manage your stress. And I'll talk more about this as well in another slide. Okay, so with that, just one quick quote. Basically, some famous psychologists once said that when you're trying to recollect a lot of information, right? Instead of looking at the book again, doing a closed book recollection is more better. And it worked for me. Like for example, I spending 2-3 hours studying something. When I need to revise that new information, try and revise it without looking at the source material. Just a tip. Okay, so what are the core study materials? Obviously, the help articles from Salesforce. All of us know it's free of cost, available. I used to read different articles, and there are a lot of good white papers. But if I could choose 3 white papers in terms of their importance, I would say the integration white paper, one of my favorite ones, the LDV white paper, and also the sharing architecture white paper. These are very important, and you need to know these pretty well. Obviously, there are so many other white papers, but these are pretty important. Recently, Salesforce, when I say recently, a few months back, Salesforce updated their architect blog and architect site. Please be sure, and I'll share this blog if you don't have the links. Obviously, I'll share this slides with you. Please be sure to check these out, because recently in the site, we have some updated data models, which you need to look at and learn, for example. And this is not just for the CTA, this is for any Salesforce architect. Then obviously, as I said, you have all the mock scenarios. So the mock scenarios are made available by Salesforce, and I have a link to that as well. And again, exam guide, very important. You need to see this the very first, that's the first thing you do before you start studying. So these are the standard study material that we have. So now let's talk about some of the lessons that I learned, some tips and tricks that I learned, and which I feel that I should have known this when I started, but I learned them towards the end. So my hindsight is the benefit for you guys, because you guys will probably benefit from this more. So obviously, this is a very tough journey, and you have to see to believe it. I don't know if you guys have tried one of these scenarios, or if you've seen any CTA preparation video or something, but it's a very, very tough thing initially. So with practice, that's how you tame this beast. So you need to divide and conquer, as with any other big problem, right? If you have a big problem, you divide it into chunks. So you take one domain, you learn it, fix the gaps there, and then move on to the next one. I won't talk about the marathon. As I said, you need to peak at the right time. The other thing that happened to me was some blind spots. For example, because I was working so much in Salesforce, I was thinking, I know the data model and stuff. And sometimes what happens is you get a false sense of security that you know something, but you may not know it as well as you think you do. So that sometimes will come to bite you. So, it's well and good if you know something, but don't ignore it. Keep revising those things also. And also, as I said, in the start, one of the best things you can do is talk to many different CTS, talk to many people who are on the journey, and get all their advice, listen to their advice, but only take what applies to you. And you make your own, opinions, and come up with your own plan, because everyone is unique, right? All of us have our strengths and weaknesses. So work towards that. And the other lesson I'll tell is, when you're studying for these certs, right? Please don't study only to pass that cert. Try to study it holistically, so that it will save time when you're doing a CTA prep. You can actually shave time off by doing the hard work upfront. The other thing is, Salesforce keeps doing releases 3 times a year. So keep up with the latest releases. For example, last few releases, Tableau CRM has become a pretty important thing to know. Mobile Publisher has come up. Now, previously OWD could not be closed down. You can only open OWD, right? But now you can basically close it using restriction rules. Also, product did not have OWD. You used to use price book to control the product's visibility, but now the product object also has OWD. It's coming up in the next release. So just have a view. I mean, you may not end up using them, but it's good to at least know, okay, fine, this option is also available for me to use. And lastly, no brainer, some hands-on learning is good. So for that, you guys are already, I'm pretty sure you guys are doing Trailhead, super badges and stuff. So what helped me, for example, is if I want to set up SSO, I will get a trial edition of Microsoft Azure AD, and then create one instance there, and then set it up with my, my developer org and set up SSO. And that way I'm like, okay, this is the way it works. Because for me, when I see things in action, that's when it will stay in my brain more strongly, right? So, okay, those are the key things I learned. And some other things, again, I see a lot of people, they say, okay, we're working hard, we're working hard. I feel that instead of working just hard, it is better to work smart. And this thing means different things for different people, and what it means is that blindly studying without any effects of that studying on you is also not good. So let's try and identify things and then study for those things. And then I said the data model is also very important, right? Because if you think about it, the data model is going to affect your sharing, is going to affect your LDV, your org strategy. It may affect your license choices. So the data model is one of the most fundamentally important things in your CTA journey. So it's not enough to learn the basic data models. I always tell people, try to learn CPQ data model, FSL data model. So then their question to me is like, do we need to know CPQ, FSL, for example? I say, don't learn it in depth, but just know the basic features and know why will you introduce CPQ? Like, what are the reasons you will extend Salesforce and introduce CPQ, for example? Also, some of the industry clouds like Health Cloud, Consumer Goods Cloud, Manufacturing Cloud, they all come with data models. Just learn them. Just learn those patterns of those data models. The second important bit is sharing. So I'll make a confident statement now. I would say that if you get your data model and sharing correctly in the CTA exam, that means you have to work hard to fail from that point, because they are so important. Because if you get these two correct, that means the rest of the solution will almost be correct. So always focus on these two. And obviously it's about patterns, right? Even in our real life, we use a lot of patterns. So patterns could be org strategy pattern, integration patterns, data model patterns. So when you're taking a CTA, you should study to such an extent that when you see some requirement, you should immediately think, okay, fine, this requirement, that means I'm going to use a request response integration pattern. This requirement means I'm going to use account, opportunity, lead, and order. So you should come to that level, like identifying the patterns and using them immediately. Then I spoke about Anki, right? So Anki is all about the concept of spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is one of the psychological concepts wherein when you have tough things to learn, you need to basically space them out and keep repeating them. And that's what the Anki's algorithm will do for you. So that's why I like Anki, because again, as I said, it's a free open source tool, and you can create question answer pairs. And basically that algorithm will basically say, okay, I showed him this question today, I will not show this for the next week. And you can actually control that. So I had around 150 questions, tough concepts. I put them here, and I feel in hindsight that this helped me a lot. And I feel that I could have used more. I could have probably added 500 questions, but I just put 150. So I hope some of you can make more use of something like this. And again, I said the why is very important. See, the judges, right? So they are listening to your answers. And of course, telling them the answer is important, but you need to add one statement saying why you chose. For example, you will say, and let me talk about the second point. You should never mention options to judge. For example, let's say there's a integration which requires asynchronous pattern, right? And you have options like you have outbound messaging, or you have platform events. You can't say I'll use outbound messaging or platform events. You have to choose one. For example, you can say, because there's a requirement that we need two-way SSL, therefore I will use outbound message for this integration, right? That is the way you need to answer, like the answer and why. We don't want open-ended things, because judges want one clear answer and they want to know why. So again, as I said, practice. I'll grow tired of saying this, but basically you're looking to develop muscle memory. Because when I came close to my CTA, I was able to draw these diagrams. Like if someone wakes me in the night, shakes me and says, okay, it's 2 a.m. now, sit and draw the OAuth user agent flow. I was able to do that because I had practiced to some extent, and that was really useful for me. And one other tip for me is when you're trying to present your solution, do record yourself and then watch it. And for me personally, it's hard to listen to myself, which you guys are doing right now, but that's the key. That's very important because that will give you some clues. Okay, maybe you're fast here, maybe you're not convincing enough here. So it will give you some clues as to how to fix your presentation for the future. Okay, so with that, again, if you see in Star Wars, Master Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. So it's like for me when I was thinking of the CTA, it's like there's no option, right? I've already put my step forward. I'm not going to back down now. I'm going to keep trying. It's obviously a hard journey, but we'll get there in the end. Okay, so let me talk about the other bit, right? Many few people talk about this now. As I said, the CTA, and in fact, our day-to-day lives itself, it's full of stress because of the pandemic has added more pressure. In this IT industry itself, it's a bit hard to work in, right? So different expectations, overtime and stuff like that. So imagine adding the CTA on top of that, then you've got more stress added. And so interestingly, I did the CTA in Melbourne. If you guys have seen the news, right, Melbourne had so many lockdowns, like half the year lockdown, curfews and stuff. It was one of the world cities with the highest lockdowns actually. So it was so weird, right? And even for an introvert like me, I hardly go out, and even I felt the pain of that, right? Stuck in the house, and there's so many uncertainty about work and stuff. So all of this added up, and I felt, when you're given a choice, if I ask you a question, what is more important to you? Is it the CTA? Is it your work or your health? I hope your answer is health, right? Because health is number one. And for some people, health is in our hands. Unfortunately, some people, health is not even in our hands, but we need to do whatever we can, right? At least in terms of stress and stuff. So I realized one very funny thing that happened was, it sounds silly now. I was having a lot of weaknesses and headaches and stuff, right? So I went to the doctor, got some blood tests done, and then they said you've got acute vitamin D shortage, and that makes sense because you're not going out. There's no more sun falling, and then you need to take vitamin D and improve that. And once I did that, that helped me, like that gave me more energy levels and stuff. So just small things like that kind of was helping me in terms of being alert and being more active, because the more energy you have and the more healthy you are, obviously you can push yourself harder. It's basic common sense, right? So what I'm saying is that it's very important to manage stress. For some people, it could be meditation. For some people, it could be religious, like praying stuff. Whatever works for you, do that. Manage your stress the way that you think. Obviously, for me, I built a PC in the holidays, and I wouldn't call myself a big time gamer, but I like to play CS:GO a lot. So I used to do that to fight stress. But sometimes the flip side is sometimes playing CS:GO, there'll be stress in the game, so that will add more stress. So sometimes I have to stop playing that also. But yeah, but gaming really helped me a lot. Okay, so obviously when you're doing CTA, I sometimes feel that there are moments when I felt I should give up. I felt I'm not capable of this. It's not for me. I can't do the hard work. And many times I felt I should just stop the CTA. But then next day I used to again get up and I'm like, okay, let me not give up. Let me keep going. So I used to keep pushing on. I used to look for inspiration from other people. And I felt that learning from failures, when you know your gaps or your failures, it's very good to learn from it, because that's the best learning opportunity for you, right? And I was very open to feedback. Like I was waiting for feedback from people because I felt that will make me a better architect. And again, being calm and composed is always the best way to solve a problem, as opposed to being worried about things. And again, as I said, conserve energy and try to peak during the last few weeks of that CTA study time. Okay, so again, for me, the cats were a huge help, right? So they helped me a lot in terms of stress. So I was really lucky. In fact, pets, you're lucky if you have them. They really do help. Okay, so some other resources I used. Interestingly, these are interesting things. So the first one is this person called Tamim Bahari. Maybe some of you have heard him. I think heard of him. He is a CTO at Cognizant based in the UK, and he wrote this book called Becoming a Salesforce Certified Technical Architect. I highly encourage you guys, if you guys have the opportunity, please do buy a copy, either the ebook or the actual book. For me personally, I found this book very late in the game, but I felt that this is not just one of the best CTA books. This is one of the best books of Salesforce period, because that is the quality of the writing and stuff. So again, I use my own same principle, right? I read this book end to end many times, and I took some good advice that he had. Some things what he said they didn't apply to me, so I ignored them. I took the good parts from this book and I applied that, and it helped me a lot. It helped refine my thinking. The second is this book called Ultra Learning. I'll be lying to you guys if I say I read this book end to end. I didn't. Obviously there's no time for it, but maybe if you guys can make more benefit, I'll just stop and tell a story about him. So this Scott H. Young guy, what he did was he basically went to Harvard University, and Harvard has a Bachelor of Computer Science, which is a very tough course. It's a 4-year degree. He actually did that whole degree in 1 year or the equivalent of it, and he used those techniques. And those techniques he has put here, like how do you study large amount of information, how do you condense it, how do you remember those things. And that is where I learned about that spaced repetition, about Anki. So I took few tidbits from him, but I wasn't able to take the full benefit. I feel that this book is a good book to apply for CTA, because CTA has the same thing, right? There's so much information to study. How do you condense it? How do you make the best use of your time and study smart? So if you guys have time, look at it. Third one was Power of Positive Thinking, but generally any book which reinforces positivity, right? Because again, as I said, I'm a pretty chilled out guy, but when I don't think of these things, but during the CTA, given all the stress that is coming, and given the fact that you will feel that you need to stop and withdraw from the CTA, you need to think positive. That means you need to eliminate negative thoughts, negative people from yourself, and think. So any book generally which will talk about self-help and stuff. So I used to read such books and just collect some tidbits here and there. And the other thing I felt about the CTA was, remember, as I said, right, the CTA has 8 to 12 pages of information. Imagine reading that technical information, imagine solving that in 3 hours, right? So what I did was I started reading, because in the past I used to read a lot. So I just read some non stuff, like for example World War II books, or science fiction, or comics and stuff, just something which makes you read. That way your brain subconsciously is basically reading fast, and you're basically doing comprehension. And I felt that this helped me a lot, because there is a concept called speed reading. If you guys go to YouTube and search for speed reading, right, there are a lot of videos that explain how to read fast. And doing all this helped me a little bit. I felt that I was able to read fast and ignore the noise and focus on the important bits of the CTA. Because every second or every minute that you save in the CTA during the preparation will help you a lot. So these are some of the other resources I felt very important. Okay, so now that I've mentioned all of that, let's do a quick deep dive into the actual exam. Okay, and some of you may know this. I'll just quickly repeat this. Obviously, because I'm a CTA candidate, I have, we are all bound by this credential certification program agreement. So all that I'm going to explain in the next few slides are all publicly available information and my personal experience, without sharing any secrets of the CTA. Okay, so let's look at the first thing. The very first thing, as I said, is the preparation. So taking a step back, if you think about it, the CTA exam is almost 6 hours long, 5.5 to 6 hours long, because there are some breaks in between as well, right? So it's a very long exam. And imagine, you are going through these stages one by one. Just think of that for a second. So the very first stage is the preparation. So once on the CTA day, you basically, I did it virtually. So you log in, just like how we logged in here. There's a system check, all that stuff, and then the timer starts. 3 hours. Your proctor gives you 3 hours. All the time, your proctor is watching you over the webcam, and you are given the access to the proctor's machine remotely. So there's a remote desktop connection. You get the scenario in the proctor's machine, open the scenario, and then you start solving. Everything is digital. There's no paper at this point. So then you prepare the artifacts on paper sheets on your desk, right? So basically, you get 3 hours to prepare. And the way it works is, the first bit is 2 hours, and then you get an optional break. My advice is take this optional break, because you get some time to recharge, and then you get 1 hour. So totally 3 hours of preparation time. And then by this time, obviously you're prepared, you're practiced and stuff, you're ready to take this. This 3 hours, believe it or not, like 3 hours, if you watch a movie, you will be like, when will this end, right? But 3 hours in the CTA, believe me or not, it will just go in an instant, right? And so your biggest enemy, as I mentioned, is time. So time management is very, very critical. So all those tips I mentioned previously, you need to bring everything together. And because I look at all these war books and stuff, right, I always read about these ancient times when people used to fight, right? Two armies fight. I always imagine, okay, you're trying to, each army is trying to get to the side of the other army. It's called envelopment. That means you have to envelop the other army and force them to surrender. So that's how I used to think of the CTA personally. It is you versus the CTA scenario, and you are trying to envelop the CTA. Otherwise, the CTA will envelop you. And then you will end up spending 3 hours and you won't be solving it. So you have to be very fast and you have to be on your toes. And as I said, there are different artifacts, as I mentioned, right? Those 8 to 10 artifacts. You are creating them as you go. For example, data model, you are creating the different objects as you're reading the 8, 9 pages. And many people have different ways of solving. Some people read it end to end, then they solve it. For me, 3 hours was like, it was not at all enough. So I used to, as soon as I get the scenario, I used to just start solving it. That was how I did it. And I felt that the CTA is a puzzle, because if you think about it, the judges have written the CTA and they want you to solve it, in different ways. There's no right or wrong answer as long as it's justified. Right? But always felt as I'm solving the CTA, it is a puzzle. I'm uncovering the puzzle. I'm unraveling it basically. And I felt that sometimes you may get some weird requirements. When I say weird, right, it may not, the wordings may be a bit different, or it may not make sense at that time. My lesson learned in the very hard way is that don't waste your time being stuck at it. Spend maybe a few 30 seconds or 1 minute. You're not able to figure out, just move on and then come back later. Just keep some time for it and try to come back to it. And as I said, you need to work very fast and you need to be precise. And also you need to come up with a plan. The plan means, how do you divide these 3 hours? And I will basically come up with a blog later on explaining how I did that. But at a high level, as if I mentioned, right, these 3 hours, okay, first 2 hours, what are you doing? I'll do data model. I'll do this. I'll do that. Then the last 1 hour, I'll keep it for data migration. I'll keep it for governance. So you need to divide and conquer the exam. And one more lesson I learned last time was, I got a very, it was kind of looking very tough. I was like, okay, maybe I don't know this and stuff, but I didn't give up till the very last second. In those 3 hours, you are not giving up, because imagine you have spent all this last 6 to 2 years of study, right? You need to project all of that information into this 3 hours. So don't give up till the last second. Give it your very, very best. And so with that, your proctor will stop the clock. You will not even get 1 second more. 3 hours exactly, the clock will stop. At that point, you will have to take photos of your artifacts and you will have to send it to your proctor. And then you get 15 minutes of a break. So after that 15 minutes of break is the second phase of the exam, which is the presentation phase, and it lasts for 45 minutes. So one thing here is, though, I sometimes I stop and think, in this presentation round, the amazing thing is that you are presenting to 3 amazing elite CTA judges. Just think about it for a second, right? Like how many of us will have this opportunity? It's a great opportunity. And for 45 minutes, they are silent. It is your spotlight. It's your stage. And you are presenting your solution, your artifacts to the judges. And you need to be concise and to the point. Because see, if you think about it, such a large solution, you need to explain everything in 45 minutes, right? So that itself is a challenge. It's an art. So even that has to be practiced. How am I practicing this, right? So, and the most important thing is, as I said, it will be on a particular domain. Let's take the example, the CTA scenario is about some energy company. Energy, it's an electrical company. It is billing its customers, so on and so forth. There is a story there. There is an end story. For example, there is lead management, there is account management, opportunities, orders. There are integrations. There is IDAM. There is security. All of that is a story. So we need to have this broader outlook, right? That's the difference between junior architects and senior architects. When we start off work, we are only doing a small piece of work. But now I'm looking up and I'm seeing the whole horizon, the whole picture. That is what we need to convey to the judge. And when you can convey that to the judges, that is when your chances of passing is maximized. So again, the right speed is the key, right? So for example, I by default speak fast, and therefore I had to train myself so that I will overcome my natural way of talking and I will talk at a decent speed, so that I will stop and let the judges, at least see what is happening and stuff. The a few seconds of a stop between important points. And also the right keywords, right? We are not looking for buzzwords. Some candidates, they'll use all kinds of buzzwords, and then we ask them what does it mean, they will not know it, right? I'm talking about the right keywords, right? Asynchronous, synchronous, request response, things like that, right? The right keywords, so that the judges are, okay, this guy or this person or this lady understands that the integration is going to be a synchronous integration, and move on after that. So again, when you are giving the solution, always tell them why. As I said, for example, the synchronous integration, I'm going to use LWC. I'm going to use this because the user has to see the success or failure message at the end of the integration. That is why it cannot be asynchronous. So again, as I said, lots of practice and fine tuning, and I kept this for the last. So my lesson is, don't keep this for the last. Try and do this presentation maybe a few months previously, so that you have more time to make it more refined. Okay, so once that is done, there is again a break of 15 minutes. So in the 15 minutes, the judges will basically, they'll be taking notes as you have been presenting, and they will basically discuss, what are the areas where they need to ask you questions. Now, this is the make or break section in the CTA. Sometimes even if your solution is bad, even if your presentation has not gone so well, you still have an opportunity to pull it back in the Q&A section. And the Q&A section, remember, it's only 40 minutes long. So what happens here is the judges will ask you questions. And this is a very, just imagine this for a second. This is a very intense round, right? Because there are three highly qualified, highly experienced judges, and they're asking questions round robin, like point blank, one after the other. There's no time to recover. One question from this judge, one question from that judge. It will keep coming. So you need to be answering. And you need to be very calm and composed. And obviously, it's a no-brainer. Be respectful and professional to the judges. And you need to defend your solution very confidently. But having said that, sometimes the judges may shed some light. For example, you may have misunderstood a requirement and you will come with this. For example, you may say, I am going to use a single org strategy. But the judges may say, oh, we have got compliance requirements, we have got governance requirements. What happens then, right? Then you're like, oh, I missed that. Okay, now I'm going to use multi-org strategy. So you should be flexible. So that shows that you're a flexible architect who will listen to the requirements of the customers and change the solution on the fly. You have the capability. You need to show that. But the problem is you also need to be aware of the domino effect. So in the example which I mentioned, if you change your solution to multi-org, remember, if multi-org happens, that means it affects your LDV, it affects your role hierarchy, it may also affect your governance, it may have an effect on your system landscape. So you must call that out. You must say, okay, I'll change it to multi-org, but then my reporting will change, my role hierarchy changes because now the orgs are split up. And now my LTV is not a concern because now the orgs have split up. So therefore data is also segregated and divided across the different orgs, for example. That's just an example. And the other thing is the answers must be very precise. If I ask you a question, can you explain what is a connected app in 30 seconds? So ask yourselves, can you answer it today? That is the way you need to train yourselves how to answer a question. Okay, so then the other thing I have learned is, don't try to fool, three CTS, right? Sometimes they may be a question, you really don't know it. It is perfectly okay to say, I don't know. Instead of trying to make up something, then the judges will go somewhere else. All that's not needed. Don't know something, just say don't know, so we can move on. The other thing I learned is the candidate is in control of these 40 minutes. Remember, as I said, this round is the make or break. You are in control of the 40 minutes. So you should stop wasting too much time. And if you don't know something, just say don't know, or let's say, can we please come back to this? And the judges will move on, right? And sometimes it's okay to take small pauses. Especially what happens is, as I said, right, the data model is the most important artifact. And sometimes the judges want to make sure that your data model is correct. They may ask you some questions. And when you are listening to the questions, you may realize that you need to make some changes in your data model. You don't need to physically make the changes. You can tell the judges, okay, I need to introduce a junction object here because of what you mentioned. And it's okay to take a small pause. You can say, okay, judges, can I take 30 seconds? I'll quickly look at the data model. Obviously, that 30 seconds time is not added extra. It is part of the 40 minutes, right? But you have taken a step back and you're given yourself some time to breathe, right? And if you don't get it within 30 seconds, it's okay to say, okay, I don't know this, let's come back to it. And if there's time, they will come back to the thing. So those are some of the key tips that I learned. Again, as I said, it's an intense round, but it is the last round. And once this is done, that's it. So it's a huge sigh of relief. And after this, 20 minutes, your proctor will spend time with you. You'll have to tear up your artifacts and stuff, and then you disconnect from the session and you're done with the CTA. So that's the end of the CTA. So obviously, once the CTA is done, obviously all the hard work has been done. So, whether what happens now, it's the time to relax. And I feel that whether you pass or fail, attempting the board itself is a huge accomplishment because it's very few people get to even take the board. So even doing that is a great thing. And nowadays it takes around 2 or 3 weeks for the results to come. And many times what happens is the board will keep replaying in your head. You're like, you know how it is, right? So let's say a customer asks you a question today. You give some half answer, and later you will be like, oh, I should have answered this, right? Your brain basically thinks in the background. It comes back and says, oh, you should have done this. That guilt kind of feeling comes a lot. You need to overcome that because see, once the Q&A is done, that's it, right? You can't go back in time and change stuff. It's okay. Let's not replay those things. Try not to do that. So once you get your results, whether pass or fail, you will get feedback from the judges, positive and negative. So when I got my pass, I still got some negative feedback also from them. It's like these things could have been improved, right? I took them seriously, and some of them I've been working on, and that helped me a lot. Obviously, when you pass, right, you get a certificate, you get an email like this, right? It's one of the best emails ever. I don't know if any email can overcome this, but it's a huge feeling, right? Like you get this email in the morning and you see this, it's amazing. So that itself makes it worth doing the CTA. And obviously, I feel that, once I pass it, it's time to give back. And right, I'm like a part-time coach for someone internally at Salesforce. So that's the way I'm giving back. And now I want to start helping the public also by talking about my experience. And also soon I'll write a blog about some of the other things that I learned about the CTA. So that's also coming soon. Okay. So obviously, people who fail the CTA, I have huge respect for many people. Like some people, they fail, once, twice, thrice, and then they pass on the fourth attempt. If you think about people like that, right? Obviously, they are so brave that they are not given up, right? And it's like that. We all have heard this, right? If you don't succeed first time, you always have to try again. And some people cannot, right? They'll take a break, or they'll say, okay, when this is enough, I had one attempt. Everything is fine. It all depends on what your priorities are in your life. So other things I'll quickly cover up, and I just have a few more slides to go. Obviously, as I said, you have the architect trailblazer community, which I mentioned. But I've seen that on Twitter and LinkedIn. If you guys have seen, people ask for study buddies and stuff, right? You can form your own thing. There's no harm in forming your own study group, maybe Karachi study, CTA study group, or Pakistan, or get other people from other places and form a study group, and and search for publicly available CTA scenarios. As I mentioned, Salesforce has made our scenarios available for you, like the publicly available ones. Some other ex-CTAs have also written their own scenarios, which I found helpful. And there are many such folks online. So you will get around 20, 30 scenarios. And then imagine if you do each of them twice or three times, that is like almost 40 to 60 mocks. That much you can do. And that will be enough to, have a very solid shot at the CTA. Then there is Flow Republic. You may have heard of this, right? These are a paid CTA training. They have very high success rates. Obviously, I'm not affiliated with in any way with them. I just know that they exist, and it's, you have to pay for this training. But obviously, they have got very high pass rates, which is the good thing about them. Then Ladies Be Architects, you must have heard about this group, right? A lady called Gemma Blizzard started this, and obviously this is primarily geared for women to be more architects, because there are fewer women in the architects group. But anyone can basically join and get help from them. Then obviously, as I said, you can try and find a mentor or a coach, but I realize that this is more it's very hard, right? So because many people are busy, and as I said, it's not just one person who helps you, it's a mix of different people. And I say, people say that it takes a village to make a CTA. So my take here is that if people are busy, instead of making them a dedicated mentor, you can like get bits and pieces from people. Like have some questions, okay, reach out to someone and say, okay, I need help with this, or can you, what's your opinion on this, and get answers on that. A lot of people I've seen in the CTA, if they don't have a mentor, they'll form a study group and they study with themselves. Self-study can surely get to the CTA. As long as you have someone just to oversee you a little bit, and when you do your mocks, people are there to listen to you and give feedback, right? That is also an option. For me personally, YouTube was a very huge treasure chest. Many are there to list, but I would say these two were my main sources. This person called Johan Furman, I think he's based in Europe, and he had a lot of videos on the CTA, like many mocks of his he uploaded, and they gave me a lot of insights. Similarly, Apex Arts also had a lot of videos, and that was pretty awesome. So I think these are the other resources that I found were useful. Then recent changes that happened, as you guys know, the exam is being conducted virtually. Previously, the exam was a physical exam, but now it has become virtual because of the pandemic. It may become physical again, like you may have exams, but the virtual will never go away. And I would prefer the virtual exam. So there's the schedule here. Also, previously, you had to open a case with Salesforce. Now you don't have to open a case because these guys have come up with the new exam. And I said, I'll talk to you guys about what this exam means, right? So this exam is called the Architect Review Board Evaluation. You have to pass this exam before you're allowed to sit the board exam. So think of it as a mini CTA board. That means instead of a large scenario, you get a smaller scenario, simpler one. When I say simpler, relatively simpler. And you have 60 minutes to read and give the solution for, and then 30 minutes to present. And then one CTA judge or a couple of judges will basically do the same Q&A with you for 30 or 40 minutes. And obviously, this is not a joke. You have to pass this basically. But the difference is, after this, they will spend at least 45 minutes with you and they'll give you feedback. And I believe that this is very valuable, right? Because where else will you get the opportunity to get 45 minutes or 1 hour with a CTA judge who is giving you personal feedback on your attempt? So this is, I think this is a very good step. Of course, it adds one more step to the CTA journey now. So once you pass this successfully, then you can, schedule your CTA board exam. So that's the new process and the new changes that happened in the recent months. Okay, so quickly talk about the myths. I won't talk about everything. Main myth is, in interest of time, many people say, okay, you need to be technical or you need to know programming to be a CTA. So I always tell them, see, obviously I have a strong background as a programmer, but in terms of code, all you need to know is that, okay, the out of the box Salesforce cannot solve this requirement. Therefore, I need to use code to solve this requirement because it may have scalability issues or things like that. As long as you know those things, that is good enough. You don't need to know the intricacies of LWC or Apex or Visual Force. That's not at all required. Okay, so the CTA, I believe, is a purely democratic kind of an exam. Anyone, as long as you are capable of getting the application and system architects, any one of you can definitely be an aspirant for the CTA. Okay, so and for that very reason, as you know, Salesforce recently bought the solution architect path, right? People who don't need to be super technical, they can go and do the B2C solution architect and the B2B solution architect. There are different pyramids for them. I am also looking into this exam because this is also a written exam. It's not like the CTA, there's no board exam, but this exam is pretty tough based on the study guide what I saw. Like I need to learn a lot of things, for example, B2C, commerce cloud, so on and so forth. So these are some alternate paths if the CTA is not your cup of tea. Okay, so with that, just some last links. I think I mentioned most of them. One thing which I see people don't realize is that there are office hours from the CTA team, the technical architect team. You can click this link, find some hours, and once you're ready, you can talk with them. Recently, the Tailhead global director, Suzanne, and also my colleague Gaurav, who is a technical architect director, they had a presentation on Apex Hours. I would encourage you all to look at that presentation. It is similar to mine, but it's more of a formal presentation of the CTA and more of, what are the changes and stuff like that. And then this resource by this person, which you will get the link, is basically the best resource that I found for all the different flows, because a lot of flows are updated and there are new flows coming in terms of SSO and WAT. And this person, I felt that this was the best flows. In fact, it also has a Heroku app where you can actually go and step by step, you can step through all the SSO and WAT flows, which I found was pretty important and useful. Okay, so with that, I'll probably come to the end of this. Just to summarize, I hope it didn't take too much time, but basically, as I said, right, there is no compulsion for anyone to do the CTA. Like it's obvious a choice. And as I said, it's always about the journey. The journey is more important than the destination. And I felt that because I was on this journey, it personally helped me a lot. So hopefully others who are on journey will also see the benefits of it. As I said, anyone who has the, just the aptitude for Salesforce certifications can aspire to be a CTA. It doesn't have to be, a developer or technical architect only. A functional consultant, BA, or even a solution architect. Anyone can, if you want to be a CTA, definitely you can try and become a CTA. But my main advice is, health comes first. So sometimes if it gets too much, nothing wrong in taking a step back, and then coming back refreshed and trying and attempting a CTA. And obviously, one thing I realized in Salesforce is that, with anything, right, if we don't train or if we don't revise things, those things we keep forgetting those things. For example, I have my Tableau CRM certification, but in the last 6 to 8 months, my customer did not use Tableau CRM. So I've kind of forgotten a few things, I realized. So it's the same thing with anything technology, right? Unless you keep revising the key concepts, you will keep forgetting. So whether you do your CT or not, always have a mindset of practicing and revising some of the key architecture concepts. As I said, none of you are alone, right? So there's a whole social media ecosystem, LinkedIn, Twitter, all these different groups. Reach out to people. And one thing is, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's a CTA today in Pakistan, right? I know a lot of my colleagues who are Pakistan origin and they are based abroad. I would love to see, like, it'd be amazing. Like, imagine the person who does this becomes the first CTA who is presently in Pakistan. That would be an amazing thing to see, and it will be amazing to even contribute even a little bit to that journey of that person. So with that, I'll just say thank you guys for, like, once again listening to my journey and some of my tips. And so I wish you guys all the best if you guys are embarking on your journey to CTA. And so with that, I come to the end of my presentation, guys. Thank you once again, and definitely do keep in touch with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Calvin. That's a huge information, and I've never seen anyone giving us a lot of information. Thank you so much for that. And I can see there are a couple of questions from. I'll go
Yes,
ahead with my first question.
yes,
Thank you so
please.
much for the evaluation exam. I didn't know about it. Um, so is there any guide available for the exam?
Um, Let me see if this works. Yeah, so there is a guide. So on the architect Trailblazer community, recently one of the the Trailhead team members, they uploaded some information about this. I think they have a basic guide, and they also have a sample scenario, which is along the lines of what you will get in the evaluation exam.
That's great. And what do you think is the exam fee for this evaluation exam?
I am not sure, but what I do know is, previously the Salesforce had a very high fee, right? So now I think they've broken the fees between that and the evaluation exam. So it was, I think, don't quote me on this, it was 6,000 USD for the whole exam. And I think the eval now is, I think, 1,500 USD or something like that. So they'll split the cost between the eval exam, which is a smaller number, and the remaining chunk is for the actual exam.
Well, that's better. That's a lot better.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that for the actual CT exam we'll have, as we are spending 60 minutes for this
Mhm.
evaluation exam, doesn't mean that any change will have been made on the actual exam, like it has been reduced the time or complexity for that, or,
No, no.
okay, okay.
No, yeah. So I think what happened, as I said, right? So this is my personal opinion. So as I said, right? So the application system architect, there is a bit of a gap between those exams and the CTA, because suddenly you're given the 3 hour exam. So I think what we saw based on all the candidates, because there's a relatively low passing rate, this is an opportunity to give the candidates a watered down version of the CTA. So that's like a practice, and to see if the candidate can pass the smaller version before giving them the chance. Because if you think about it, you're bringing 3 CTA judges, right? So their time, almost 4 hours of their time is being spent. So that's like 12 hours of their time, and all that stuff. So we want to make sure that more and more qualified people get the chance to actually take the board exam. I think that is the main reason why the eval was introduced.
It makes sense. Before I ask my another question, I would like everyone to, all of you has the access for the mic and camera. So you can turn on your camera or mic, and if you have any question, you can talk to Calvin directly. And I think that there's one question by Ankit. I'll give him an opportunity to ask himself. Um, and the other thing that I want to talk to you about is that can you please share this PPT, or either share the URL that you have on this
Yeah,
PPT?
yeah. I will share this with you offline, Hamza.
Awesome. I'll share
Yeah,
with the team members.
sure, sure, no problem.
Those URLs definitely gonna help with the tool that you have mentioned, the community URLs and the study groups. That's perfectly great.
Yes, I've tried to add all the links possible. So yeah, I think we should cover most of them for sure.
Awesome. And I think let me ask what Ankit had asked earlier. So he's saying that I'm just afraid about the exam fee. That total amount reminds me to think of again to invest in CTA. I might be well prepared, but what about that things in mind can bring anxieties?
Okay, that's an interesting question, right? So
Right.
yeah, so yeah, again, if I think about this, obviously I was a bit lucky, whether I worked at Salesforce or other places, that the employer was helping with this. Obviously, the CTA is not like the other exams, right? Because there's a huge jump in the price. So I would say, maybe you need to take the help of our employers to kind of look at the fees. And because this is, I look at it as an investment not only in ourselves, but also we are giving back to the company in terms of being a better individual. And from their point of view, if you become a CTA, it's their stock obviously goes up, right? So it's good for them. It's a win-win situation. So that's how I look at it. I did have a situation once where I thought maybe I may not get support from my company. That didn't happen, but I was thinking, okay, if I have to spend this money, this is still a investment of my own. This is going to pay off dividends. And I've seen my own career. Like I've spent sometimes some places I spent my own money on certifications, and they did translate into benefits in the long term. So that is my personal view. But obviously, I do acknowledge that that is a very huge sum, and that again underscores the need why we need to get prepared so well, so that whether it's our money or whether our employer is paying for it, it is still substantial amount of money, and that's therefore we need to respect the CTA and prepare well so that we maximize our chance of passing. I think that's what I would say about this. But I would definitely underscore the fact that, in my personal opinion, it has always been a great investment. And hopefully, if you can find your way to get your employer to actually fund this, that would be fantastic. So yeah.
That's great. I think we are out of questions. I don't. All of you, we have the last opportunity for all of you to ask any questions if you have. Calvin is here for us, and I think this is the best opportunity that we all can get. And the one thing that Calvin and I talked about, that it was a myth earlier, that I mean, I'm also about to I'm also looking forward to have the CTE exam near in
Yeah.
future, and I'm almost done with the solution architect and application architect.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. And that, and I know that this will take me more than 6 or maybe 2 years or applied for the CTA. And
Yeah.
earlier I was thinking that I might need to have the knowledge of all of the clouds. And
Okay.
thank you for clarifying that I don't need all of the information, but just to know how that which cloud does what. So if there's any requirement, I can suggest the clients which cloud to go forward.
Correct. Yes, yes. And see, that's a very good question actually, because like, I'll take an example. I'll just make this up. So you may see a requirement where there is something about maintenance schedule, and someone has to go somewhere to the plant location, fix something. So immediately what comes in our mind is FSL, right? You've got maintenance schedule, you've got work order, asset, all that stuff. So at that point, there's a balance. So if there's a very complex requirement that requires the customer to actually purchase FSL, because at the end of the day, as architects, right, we are responsible to tell the customer how much money are you going to spend. Like if there's a small requirement that requires FSL, are you going to ask the customer to spend all the money to buy the FSL license? Maybe not, right? That won't be a good justification. I can't justify that well. So what I'll then say is, okay, fine, I'm going to borrow the object from FSL and I'm going to create a custom object instead, because it's just a bunch of objects, and that's how I'm going to solve. But what if the requirement was that you need to have the scheduling, the dispatcher functionality? That cannot be done easily using custom techniques. So you have to then use FSL. Then you have to think of FSL license and stuff. So I think that is the trade-off. As long as you know what is the high-level functionality that FSL brings, or for example, CPQ brings to the table, and which circumstances will you introduce CPQ or FSL versus if there's just a small subset of it, then you can get along by just adding a bunch of custom objects, and you don't have to use the CPQ license. So that's how I thought about that problem. And in no
That's
way,
great.
yeah, and in no way do you have to learn those things end to end. Obviously, if you know them, it's a bonus, but you don't have to learn them in and out, in my understanding.
That's absolutely right. Brother, do you have any question for Calvin? I think in my opinion, your presentation was knowledge enough that everybody needs not to have any questions. It has all of the things that we will ask for. And thank you so much for preparing so deep knowledge presentation. That's really great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I was concerned that I probably took a lot of time and there's a lot of information, but thank you guys for patiently listening to it. Obviously, as I said, I tried to put all the information here, and I'll share
Yeah.
this deck with you guys, and you can ask questions offline as well if you guys come up with anything later on Twitter or LinkedIn. No problem.
And before getting leaving, I just want to ask you permission. So is it okay if I upload this recording on a YouTube or channel?
Yes, I think that should be absolutely fine. No problem.
Awesome. That's great. So I assume that we do not have any other thing, but can you please confirm?
Uh, yeah, sure. But I think I just want to say thank you to Calvin. It was one of the most detailed CTA information under the presentation that I've ever got. Like, I think very few CTAs talk about like what kind of background that you need. But like as you mentioned, you don't need to be too technical. Like as you have a very technical background, like you know about the C and the Java, you like all your initial learnings. So like as myself, like I'm not a technical person. I'm on a functional side, but I think you gave me some hope. Like I can now go to the CTA exam if I want to.
Yeah,
So I think,
absolutely.
yeah, I'll be thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
You can.
don't, yeah, I don't have any other questions, Hamza.
That's great. So thank you so much, Calvin, for joining us.
Okay.
I think that we will be thanking you um, for providing that knowledge. I was looking forward to have this PPT and the URLs. I'll definitely join the community groups and the URL that you have shared. And
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'll try my best to keep connecting with you. And also I'm also looking forward to have to ask you multiple questions when I will be applying for the CTA.
Okay, definitely. You can definitely do that, and all of you in this group. And yeah, it'll be great to see one of you, becomes a CTA eventually. It'll be fantastic. So all the best to all of
That's
you.
great.
And once again, thank you all, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Okay.
Bye, Calvin.
Okay.
And thank you
Okay.
everyone for joining us.
Sure. Take
We'll
care, guys.
have
Bye bye.
bye.